Hey guys, Kyle here with Gnarly Knives, and today I want to talk about a sweet blade. I have a little Thanksgiving special talking about the Spyderco sliverax. Now this knife here I have shown a couple times in a few videos, but I figure now is a good time to do a full review on it. I've had this knife for about 6 months now, and I've absolutely fallen in love with this knife. I would argue this is probably my favorite folding knife that I own currently. It's definitely in my top 3, up there with my Spyderco Paramilitary 2, as well as my recently acquired Benchmade Griptilian. This knife, like I said, I've had it for a while now. I've carried it a lot, and I'm going to try and not make this video to be too long. I'm going to try and cap it about 15 minutes. I know I usually end up going a half hour, 40 minutes, usually in the mid to high 20s anyway. So let's just jump right in with the specs on this. Now this knife, I just measured it, is exactly 8 inches from the tip of the blade to the end of the handle, and you have a 3.5 inch cutting edge, which is pretty great because a lot of places 3.5 inches is that cutoff for the legal limit of carrying a knife. So this actually will be legal in a good number of places, not everywhere. Some places have smaller restrictions, but on average, most places 3.5 inches is the limit, and we are right at 3.5 inches, so that's great news for a lot of people. This knife is a compression lock flipper, which is pretty cool. From what I understand, it's one of the first compression lock flippers Spyderco has done. I don't know if it's the first, but I know it's right up there where they first started really combining the two. And then getting into the handle, it is carbon fiber. I should show this a little better. It is carbon fiber in G10. So the bottom of the handle material is G10 with the carbon fiber overmold. I mean, that's fine with me. You know, I can understand some people would prefer full carbon fiber, and I mean, I'm no different, but honestly, it's not really a problem. I haven't noticed any separation or anything from the carbon fiber and the G10. I do have another Spyderco, the Sage 1, that's the same carbon fiber G10 laminate, same thing, no issues. This knife is super smooth. It's probably the smoothest knife that I have. It's just so, the knife just, it's very drop shutty. You know, I'll even show you too, you can kind of, it's very smooth. It is on ball bearings. This knife, like I said, I do carry it a good amount. This is usually my more, if I'm like going out, you know, I do have a few, you know, refer back to one of my first videos, the gentleman and lady folders. This is definitely the one that inspired the idea for that video. I don't always carry it, you know, when I'm dressing up in a gentlemanly way, but I just really like carrying this knife a lot. I'm actually probably going to carry it today going out for Thanksgiving. Actually, I know I'm going to carry it. The knife is typical with most Spydercos, the full flat grind, and it actually is ground fairly thin down at the edge for being a relatively thick blade stock. They've done a really good job with this. I absolutely love this knife. It is very slicey. I have done a lot of cutting with it and even done some food prep with it. I know it's not really what it's made for, but just for me, it's just a way to try out with different things, see how well it holds up. And I haven't done a carving with it yet, but I want to carve something soon to really test out the handle. But the handle is actually pretty comfortable, and it does have kind of a cool funky shape. You do have a very large cut in here, and it does fit the hand really well. The knife, it's not super thin, but it's not very thick either. But even with that cut in, it still holds, it still fits my hand very well and is actually pretty comfortable. So, because it's one thing I know I've kind of talked about, I do kind of like knives that have a more neutral handle, and this one very much is the opposite of that. It is very, you know, locks you right in. But this knife, I can say I have no worries of it coming out of my hand, but especially riding up on the blade. I mean, it's not even so much you have a finger guard, which you do from the flipper, but I mean, your hand is part of the handle. I mean, your hand is into the handle when you hold it. And as I've said before, you got large size hands, and it fits my hand very well. What I think also helps is they do have this nice palm swell here. Instead of, you know, they could have just brought it straight up. to me, but they put that swell up in there, and that really does add a lot to it. And what is kind of cool is because it is the wire clip from Spyderco, which I do really like, but I discussed with a few other knives with similar pocket clips, not just necessarily these, but we have that right like 90-degree bend in it. It actually really doesn't bother my hand. The way it's just shaped, it just kind of tucks into the fold of my hand, whereas some other knives, it really just kind of digs in after using it for a while. I'll notice it kind of building a little bit of hot spot. This one, actually, I really haven't found that to be the case, because you can a lot of times just feel just from holding it, and this does not have that issue at all, which I think is pretty great. The blade steel, it is S30V. As you probably know if you've watched a few of my videos, I love S30V. It's not the top super steel in the world, but I think it's an absolutely great steel. I think S30V, excuse me, gets a little bit of hate. Don't really quite understand why. I think a lot of it just comes to a lot of people have misconception that it's difficult to sharpen. It's actually really not. I think it's actually a pretty easy steel to sharpen and put an edge on, and it takes a very, very good keen edge, and it holds the edge for quite a long time. I promise this is not going to be a video talking about S30V. I do want to start getting into doing videos discussing different steels and just kind of my experiences and uses with them, and maybe dispelling some myths, but this will not be that one. But like I said, the knife is very, very comfortable. You can hold it in a few different grips. You know, even if you had to hold it in something like a grip like this, I mean, short of for self-defense, I don't know what else you would need to be holding it like this for, but with that cut in, it is still pretty comfortable like this. So if that is something that you consider or look for in buying a knife, I think this would be a pretty decent candidate for something such as that. Now, this knife, we'll just do the price real quick. When I bought this knife, it was $170 on Amazon. I just checked literally moments ago before the video, and it is going for $150 on Amazon right now. So it's something, if this is a knife you're thinking about, now might be the time to jump on it. Don't know how long that price is going to stay like that. Like I said, when I bought it was $170, but most of the time sometimes I just like looking up, knives, just see where the prices vary and stuff like that, how they change. I don't know why. For me, it's just part of the fun. But I also checked it on Blade HQ. Blade HQ, it's going for $165. So I would say, depending on where you're looking, you're still going to be looking at $150 to $170 range. I haven't seen it go for above $170. So I feel like, I'd say average, you're probably going to be looking, generally speaking, say it's about a $160 knife. Now, I do think I think it's actually a pretty decent price for it. I mean, of course, if something they want to offer cheaper, why not? I will not stop them on that. But I feel like for the materials, the action, the performance with it, you know what? Fair enough, Spyderco. That's how I look at it. I mean, it's a very, very fun knife to play with. It's very easy to use, and it does offer a lot of potential for me. I mean, it's cool because you get the couple different ways you can open it. Of course, like we said, you got the flipper, and then the infamous Spidey hole. You can still do your regular thumb flicks or your Spidey flick. Now just getting into a little bit of some of the stuff that isn't so great, doesn't necessarily make it a bad knife. Just as we were referencing with the Spidey hole, absolutely functional and usable, but just with having this cut in, it does make it a little bit tougher to get to. Granted, the main point of it, or idea of it, is to be a flipper. But, some people still like, just using the Spidey hole, which is fine. I'll use both on this. Most of the time, it's really just the flipper. Another thing, too, just want to notice, or just mention, so the cutting edge goes right to here. So it actually goes a little behind where the handle comes out to here, and the edge down to here, which is great because, I always advocate I would rather a longer edge than a blank spot, which functionally it's fine, but when it comes to sharpening is where I've noticed it can be a little bit of a pain, just because you just got to be a little more careful. You don't want to scratch up the sides of your handle. At least I don't anyway. I've actually been pretty lucky with it so far. I see one little graze where I came in contact. You just kissed the stone. But if you just take your time, you're slow with it, it's not that big of a deal. But it is just something to consider. This knife is out of their Taichung factory in Taiwan, which, I mean, personally, yeah, I love the whole made in America and everything. I mean, my paramilitary too, made in America, love it. But when it comes to quality, fit and finish between all the factories, they have 4 factories, and I have at least 1 to 2 knives from each of their factories. I find that quality, fit, and finish to be equal. I don't really notice that much of a difference. Every one that I've gotten from any of the factories have been very good. I mean, the blade has dead center centering. Dead center centering sounds silly. The blade is dead center in the handle, which is pretty sweet. Generally don't mind if it's a little one way or the other, as long as it's not rubbing is really my big thing. Or even if it's not just fully cocked over to one side. But this is dead center. I have disassembled this one time. It was just more to, see how it goes together and everything, and it has remained true. The knife also too does have steel liners in there. It has full steel liner on the pocket clip side, so on the right side of the handle, and then it has a partial liner. Oh, actually no, it is still full steel. It just the lighting here, but the knife is still pretty light. I'm not 100% on the weight. I would say it's in the 3-ish ounce range. It's definitely lighter than the Paramilitary 2. Paramilitary 2 is, I know, in like the 3.5 to 4 ounce range. I think it's like 3.7 ounces. This is definitely a little lighter than that. I would not say it's definitely not under 3 ounces though. Also, what is pretty cool, it is left or right capable, so if you're left-handed, you can swap the pocket clip over, which is always nice. It is tip up only, but with just the configuration with it, it makes sense why it's like that. But it's fine because I really do not carry knives tip down unless it's the only way the knife is made. Some knives are just like that. We'll just do some size comparisons. So here, the sliverax. Then we'll show this is the full-size Benchmade Griptilian. So you can see, size-wise, we're actually looking pretty similar there. Just kind of for fun here, I always love the Rat 1. You can see the Rat 1 overall is a larger knife, but cutting edge is actually the same, just because you do have that 1/4-inch blank spot there. So actually, just quickly line up, get a better idea. Looks like you have a little less than 1/8 of an inch cutting edge on the sliver. Excuse me, pardon me. Then getting to, real quick, the infamous, at least on my channel, the infamous Paramilitary 2. So we can see size-wise, we're pretty much the same, but you will have about a 1/2 inch longer cutting edge. This is just over 3 inches cutting edge on the Paramilitary 2. And then finally, the beast, the Stone Cold Steve Austin, Broken Skull by Cold Steel. So you can see this knife, so we kind of line it up pivot to pivot, is a good amount longer. The blade is about 1/2 inch long. This is a 4-inch blade. And then the handles themselves, so you got, actually, yeah, so the knife overall is about 1 inch longer with the Cold Steel Broken Skull. So this knife, who is it really good for? I think this knife is good for someone who wants to spend a little bit more money on a knife. I mean, like I said, depending where you look, it is the 150 to 170 range, which, it's not a small chunk of change. It's definitely a little investment. But I think this is a good knife for someone who, especially if someone doesn't want a very large collection, if they're not crazy obsessed like I am, and just keep buying expensive knives, this would be a great option for, like it said, especially that one of the first videos, the gentleman or lady carry knives. I feel like, especially with the handle size of this, even, Sammy, my girl, she's held the knife or whatever. I mean, she's not really into knives, so she doesn't really care, but it does fit her hand really well, and her hands are much smaller than mine. And then having the large size hands, I think size-wise, this hand will fit many different sizes of people's hands. It's a very cool knife. I mean, just, it's very, to me, I find it to be very unique. The shape of it, it's not typical of most Spydercos. Also, just, being the flipper, having the ball bearings, it's just a very smooth knife. I mean, one thing to notice, I did kind of touch upon a little bit in a previous video, but the knife, it is very easy to have it open up with a little bit of force, and this is really like very little force. So, I mean, that doesn't bother me personally, but I know some people that is a concern of theirs, especially, I can see with, especially being a tip-up knife, if you're, I mean, I personally don't do a lot of running and jumping, but I could see it being something if, depending in your pocket, unless this is like right up against your leg, I could see it potentially being an issue of it just popping out a little bit, and then, great, you reach into your pocket to grab something, and then you just impaled yourself. Now, like I said, that's not something I generally worry about too much, but it is something I can totally see being a potential issue. So it is something maybe to think about. I mean, it's something I'm sure if you played with the pivot, maybe tighten it a little bit, that might help it somewhat. I don't know if you'd ever really get rid of that issue totally, but that is just something to think about. But it is, like I said, it's a very smooth knife. It offers a lot of fun. It just has a lot of fun, the fidget factor, because, I mean, it'd be times, I mean, it drives Sammy nuts, but, I'll just be watching something, and it's just a lot of fun to play with. Alright, so we've already gone over the 15-minute mark. I am going to wrap this up very soon. But comparing it to, say, even like the Paramilitary 2, now the Paramilitary 2 is a lot of fun. It does have, the good fidget factor, of course. Not quite as smooth, but it is also on the bronze washer bearings, or bronze phosphorus washer bearings. And, from what I have noticed, because I do have a few knives on bearings now, and, disassembled and such, but also have carried pretty extensively, I have noticed with ball bearings, one thing to consider is they tend to be affected more if they get fouled up. Not that they're more susceptible to getting dirt inside them. They'll get just as dirty as something with regular washers, but these, you can have more potential for just it being a little bit grittier. You might have to take apart and clean them a little bit more often, just because of that factor. So instead of just having flat washers to open the blade, it's literally just, well, basically it looks like a washer, but it has a bunch of teeny tiny little ball bearings in it, which is actually very cool, but it does make them a little more susceptible to dirt and dust and grime. So this is not a knife that I really would recommend to be, going out doing your hard use and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sure it could handle it. You just will have to maintain it more. This is something I kind of have more of it's just, I like it. It's really cool. I do carry it a good amount, but if I was going out in the woods, if I'm going to be doing a lot of harder use stuff with the knife, I would not bring this with me. It's one of the reasons why I'd bring the Paramilitary 2 or another equivalent knife. So I think I've said just about everything I can say there. I'm going to just wrap up the video here. But you guys have a good Thanksgiving. Remember to keep carving and stay sharp. And remember to like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you guys think. Share the video. Let me know what you guys think about the knife, if you have one, if you would consider getting one, or if you've already considered getting one, what you guys think. Like I said, if you are, I'd recommend shoot over to Amazon, because it is going for $15 cheaper than it is on Blade HQ. Either way, if it ends up running out, $165, $170, I personally don't think to be a bad price for this knife. Especially with the materials. I mean, it's a high quality knife. Of course there are higher quality ones, but this is a very nice, sweet, smooth knife, and I think anybody who really enjoys having knives, or just if they're into more unique knives, I think this is a really good option for that to be included in your collection. But anyway, like I said, guys, good Thanksgiving. Also remember, check us out on Instagram at Gnarly Knives. And you guys have a good rest of your day, Thanksgiving, all that good stuff. And peace.